it's me, Jess. Welcome to my channel. I'm here with another channeled message. This is a specific message. It might resonate with you, it might not. Okay, so if this is your message, I feel like there's something here to do with a group dynamic, and there's some friction, there's some problems that are like repeating here in some kind of group dynamic. And I feel like it's kind of stumping you why these problems exist in the first place, or why they keep occurring, or why you can't solve them and get to the bottom of them. I think for most of you, this involves a family dynamic, either a family of origin or a family that you've created for yourself as an adult. But for others of you, I feel like this group dynamic is a workplace environment, or it is a friendship group. So take this however it is resonating for you. But I think even if this is, a family that you've built for yourself, a workplace, a friendship group, I do think that there's a dynamic issue going on, like to do with the structure of these group dynamics. The issues on a skeleton level, it's on a systemic level, it's on a structural level, having to do with the roles and the dynamics that are playing out in these environments. And I don't know how aware you are or other people are that are in these environments, because that's part of where the friction is coming in. Is we do have multiple people that are involved here that are at different level of consciousness, different level of awareness, that are looking at this from a higher or a lower lens than one another. And that's contributing to some of the friction, that's contributing to some of the problems, and also why it feels like you're kind of communicating past one another, and why you feel not understood, other people don't feel understood. And I feel like because of that, again, you're using maybe a lot of the same terminology as other people in these groups, but you kind of mean vastly different things. And I feel like for you and for the other people that are involved in this kind of group dynamic, this actually goes back to imbalances, relational imbalances in the family of origin. Again, for you and for the other people that are involved. Okay, so that means like your childhood and the family systems that you kind of grew up in, where the dynamics were actually off balance. And again, I don't know how aware of that you are, because the parable of the fish in water is coming to mind, where it's like, think to yourself, like, how would you describe water to a fish? Because on the face of it, it seems like nobody should understand water better than a fish. It's like, what do you mean explain water to a fish? A fish lives its entire life in water. But it's so pervasive to a fish that it becomes invisible. How do you explain something that is so pervasive that it basically becomes invisible? So family is one of those words that I think a lot of us use, and a lot of us think we mean the same thing. But really, a lot of us have had very vastly different experiences within our own families. And a lot of us kind of do know that, because like a dysfunctional family oftentimes will try to save face publicly, because social capital is a thing, and they don't want to knock their social capital. They don't want to be looked at in a certain way. They don't want to be ostracized or demonized or criticized or anything like that. But so they all kind of are in cahoots to put on a public face, but then the family dynamic is much different internally, and it feels much different internally. And I feel like that's kind of what we have going on here in this family of origin, because I do have a theory that people tend to gather around different people, places, and things in certain spaces that they take an interest in, or that feels very familiar to them, because they do have something kind of like very similar. Either it's very similar, or it's the exact opposite. Because I think if you can experience certain things like in your childhood and you're like, never again, I think sometimes that leads you to going towards the exact opposite thing and the opposite experience. But either way, I think that's how this group or this family, whether it's a friendship group, a workplace group, there could be some overlapping here, which would not be advised, because we've got people trying to sort out dynamics here. So it kind of adds layers of complexity in the situation. But I think that's what's kind of going on here. So what's similar is that there were certain energies that were out of whack in the early family environment that may or may not be seen clearly, and are seen clearly to differing levels by everybody in this group. And that's because on a karmic level, this group has been basically brought together in order to unearth this for everybody involved. But everybody is on their own path with their own pace. They're having their own awakening experience, which again is going to contribute to friction. So I kind of think it would be hard to kind of figure this out like as a group. You're probably going to have people leaving this group, etc. But it is meant to be a strong mirroring environment, because people who are in this environment, again, whether it's a family, a workplace, etc., they're going to find people who represent them very strongly. Who the way that the dynamic was off in the family of origin is very similar to their own. And so they learn very similar coping mechanisms, and their personality oriented in a very similar way. And so that holds up a very strong mirror to each other, where they're going to watch another person that they actually feel very akin to navigate that environment and get treated a certain way. And where they kind of expect for themselves that, oh, well, it's normal for me to get treated that way, or I know I'm expected to behave that way. When they see another person being treated a certain way, it kind of rings an alarm bell that they know it's wrong when they see another person going through it, which is supposed to kind of unearth that the way they've been functioning in their own life is also wrong, right? Likewise, there's going to be mirrors in this environment that are kind of oppositional mirrors, where these people also grew up in families where the dynamics were off, but the coping mechanisms that they learned and the way that their personality formed was exactly the opposite of these other people in whatever way that is. And so it's holding up that oppositional mirror where it's like they almost could not be more different, but actually the root is similar. They kind of understand each other. They probably have more in common than they do apart, but it's hard to kind of get there because you have such differing opinions and such differing approaches, and you stick to them so vehemently because it feels like a life or death situation. And the reason it feels like that is because, going back to the family of origin, that's how everybody learned to survive. And it basically equates to, I won't get resources, whether it's, love, time, attention, or it's like money, or like an investment in whatever it is that you want to do, your project, or your vision, or whatever. There's only so much to go around, and it was probably a hyper competitive family environment in some way. But it makes people feel like, well, if I don't do this, then things are not going to kind of go along to get along, if that makes sense. So I think all of that it's quite a lot, actually, to kind of sort through. And I think the problems that are being experienced in this group dynamic, whatever it is, it's being experienced by a lot of these people, maybe for you here as well, which, again, don't beat yourself up because you're on a journey here. You have a process that's unfolding, right? So it could be for you, could be for other people in this group. It could also be for leadership, because I feel like those are the three positions on the field. And again, there can be overlap here. Like, you could be a leader, or you could be in this group, and but yeah, I think it's leadership, a group, and you here. And everybody here, it's like this process that is unfolding. But the problems, I think, at first are initially for people experienced on a symptom level. So you're identifying a symptom and you're saying, well, this is the root problem. And it's not. It's actually a symptom of the root problem, if that makes sense. And so I think the way that you kind of deal with it and that you go about dealing with it is on what I have come to know as like a firefighter level of consciousness. Working in kids, this is how it was working with kids. This was how this was explained to me, is that when certain problems start happening, the problem will go off, and then you want to run over there with your hose and like put out that fire, but then another fire goes off. So then you want to run over there with that hose and put out that fire, but then another fire goes off. It's kind of like whack-a-mole, And at some point you have to ask yourself, like, why do these fires keep going off? Are we in a fire prone area? Like, what's going on? You have to start peeling back the layers of the onion. And I think that we've got people here who are on different timelines when it comes to that, because people are going to have different capabilities. Let's be honest. Some people are going to be smarter and more observant than other people. Some people are going to be more invested in this group than other people. Potentially, you could also try to bring in consultants, or like if this is hierarchical, it's like you could have like a group and a boss, but then they try to appeal to somebody who maybe has more experience or more authority in the organization, but then they come in and they really only have this superficial understanding. So they're going to go right for what everybody else went for, this superficial symptom, and identify the symptom as the problem, like everybody else has been doing. If the symptom was the problem, it would have been solved. Okay, so they didn't bring in the big guns because there was some stupid problem going on, right? You see what I'm saying? So I think it could actually add to a lot of frustration, because I think there's a lot of desperation, and there's people who feel very vehemently that they have the way, the truth, and the light here. And really, there's a deeper spiritual purpose of this group coming together, and it's to kind of unlock that. How should dynamics play out in a group environment, and how can we be a productive member of that dance company, if you will? How can we know the steps and not be stepping all over other people's feet? But you have to kind of unpack that family of origin, because, and I think this is where the dynamics are getting off, because I think in this family of origin, the dynamics were off when it came to power and when it came to love and cooperation. Now, for some people here, this family dynamic, I think they had a tyrant. I think the power was very overt. I think it was very in your face. Someone could have been throwing stuff around, punching holes in wall, or worse. There could have been physical stuff going on here. And so I think in that environment, again, you have people that are learning either, I just need to be very meek and mild. I need to shush. I need to like keep out of the way. Don't rock the boat. And if I rock the boat, I'm going to get blamed for rocking the boat. And I'm going to blame myself because I know better, because I know that that person is volatile and unhinged, or you could have people here that kind of, especially if they share a gender with the tyrant, that have kind of learned, oh, okay, whoever has the gold makes the rules. Whoever has the power makes the rules. And so that was actually the lesson that was being taught here, whether it was overt or not. I think the tyrant was probably using power incorrectly to try to teach the opposite lesson, but your actions speak louder than your words do, am I right? So you've got somebody who's going to go directly after power, whatever it is, because they feel like they will be extinguished if they don't have power. In the situation. They've just learned inherently from their family dynamics, if I don't run the show, my needs won't get met. I can't guarantee that I'll be treated unfairly. Maybe I'll even be thrown around here. And I can't have that. So I'm going to desperately go after that power. And I'm going to feel justified in seeking power, whether I should be the one seeking it or whether I really am not qualified at all. And it would be better for somebody else to kind of take up that role, right? So you've got that kind of playing out here. Then you have other people here where, again, the dynamics were still off. Sorry, my throat's going. I think this maybe is like a throat chakra issue. It's like hard to speak about these things. I think especially for people where this overt abuse was going on, they could be even scared to like speak about it, or they're so terrified. It's just like they can't get past like the terror to even like dip into like, wait, what's actually going on here? Excuse me. So there's another group here, though, where, again, the dynamics were off in their early family environment when it came to power and, again, love and cooperation. But it was off in a way that was much slicker. It was much more covert, where you do have tyrants, actually, in this family dynamic, probably parentals, or aparental, or an addiction, that somebody has that's really, dominating here in this environment. But it's using the language of family. It uses the language of cooperation. It uses the language of psychology or getting along and loving each other, but it's like a dog whistle, right? Like if you've been in that family dynamic, because the person who's saying it has an agenda, and the agenda is to keep them dominant and to keep them in power and to get their needs to be met. They've just found that they get less pushback, or that it's much more effective if they use these words incorrectly. And I think it would take a child growing up in that environment quite some years to kind of catch on, because it requires a sophistication of the brain to kind of understand exactly how they feel and exactly what is going on. And I think it just takes a lot more intellectually to kind of like come up out of that. But still, the power dynamics were kind of off kilter. So again, they could have learned, listen, this person is slick. It's just best that I not let them know that I'm on to them and that I know what they're doing. I just have, 6 more months until I graduate, baby, and then I'm out of here, But they have always just kind of known that they have to put on a performance. Or they started to know that, like probably in their adolescence or teen years. This would strike me as a family dynamic, both of these, honestly, where people here really have no idea that they don't know each other. And then they could end up feeling betrayed when somebody steps out of their role, because both of these family dynamics, I think, use words like loyalty and cooperation because they have an experience of what it actually feels like to be in their family, which is not equated to the things that we associate with family. But then they've got a culture that prioritizes family, probably, and says, listen, family is love and home, and these are the people that are always going to have your back, right? But that means something much more ominous to someone who comes from like an abusive family dynamic like this, and it means you have to put up with things. So I think everybody wants the benefits of family here, but you have people in this family that get to overassert themselves, and then you have people who are like scapegoats, or they're consistently the lamb to the slaughter. They're always made to sacrifice themselves, their needs, and just I think there's probably a lot of rhetoric in these family environments. Oh, well, that's just how so-and-so is, And so therefore that's how you're expected to be. So if you start having a scapegoat stand up for themselves and say, well, this is just who I am. And frankly, it's been thwarted long enough. And I keep telling you and nobody cares and nobody ever confronts anything and I'm out of here. Then all of a sudden somebody's going to feel betrayed because we have this silent, covert contract. I feel like this is a family that runs on covert contracts. And I think if you're trying to unpack whatever dynamic that you're experiencing here, what is the covert contract? That is like that exists between two people, that exists between this group, right? All of that. But it's throwing off the dynamics in whatever the group is that's here now, which still could be this family of origin. It's just the dynamics have changed because now you've got adult children, or now you've got to make decisions about, who's taking care of mom and dad. Do they need to maybe be put into a facility? So it could still be family of origin stuff. But it also could be family that you've built, and it could be this work environment, whatever, but it's like this outgrowth of the dynamics that were in this family. And some people are going to be replaying those dynamics and those roles exactly, and some people are going to have identified that will not be going on in my space, but they've only identified it on a symptom level. So for instance, if you grow up in a household where there is physical stuff going on, somebody could say, and absolutely not will that be going on in my family dynamic. And they think that they've eradicated power issues in their family dynamic, when maybe they didn't identify it at the root, which is that the family is being run by power instead of by cooperation. And so there's a lot of competition here. And so they could have gotten with a partner that actually came from a different family dynamic and sort of is used to wielding power in this more covert way. And then they can't figure out what's going wrong. Well, they still got with a tyrant. It's just a nice tyrant. It's a slick tyrant that's going to outthink you. That's going to be very practiced. That's going to know exactly what they're doing. And they're going to use its guile. And it's, you know what I'm saying? So, and then you could have people that think that that's what's going on, and that's not what's actually going on here. And I do think that you're going to see the things like gaslighting and, you're going to see all of those like problematic kinds of things coming from certain places here in this group dynamic. But I feel like if this is your reading, you are feeling hurt, you are feeling shocked, or you are feeling sick because of something that's gone on here, like being a part of this group dynamic. And it either is because you're coming up out of these dynamics. You can give voice to this. You understand. You're trying to heal. And this group is very much not, or not everybody, again, is like able to even like meet you on this level, especially if you're not in a leadership position, you don't have power here. You feel just at the whims of those family dynamics. Maybe you thought you'd kind of gotten over it, but this is like, it's taking a different form, but it also could be, and I do want to point this out, that for some of you, you're kind of the odd man out here in a group that maybe is healing or has healed, or maybe you found an elusive, like securely attached group of people here where the dynamics are actually appropriate, or somebody is like, especially somebody in leadership and enough people in this group dynamic, they are actually taking the steps to heal. So the dynamics are presenting healthy, but you think in your mind that the dynamics should be playing out a different way. So you are railing against somebody here, this leader or whatever, because you don't think that that's how it should be playing out, okay? Now, I think this dynamic has to do with power, and it has to do with cooperation. So, again, there is power in family dynamics, and when it's healthy, it should probably come from parents, Parents are the authorities. Their brains are fully developed. They know how to navigate the world better. But when a parent is unhealed, or they're in the grips of an addiction, or they're ABUSIVE, like them having that authority makes everything else off balance. Now you've got kids that are kind of expected to be adults and, all of that. So ideally that's where the power goes though, in a healthy situation, and it gets expressed in certain situations, but not others. When there's sometimes when a child just needs to be seen in their full humanness, and they don't, maybe they are having an emotional response and they just need to be held space, and they need to be, yeah, I understand. Sometimes I get tired and cranky too, and talked through their human experience, taught what is normal, reflected back what is actually normal, and held to reasonable standards. But when the power dynamic is off, then the parent is going to assert power when they should just be relating. But healthy leadership is able to assert power where it's necessary and then just relate where it's not, right? So you could have that kind of going on here. Like if this is a family situation where just the power dynamics are like absolutely off because someone's confused about where there should be power and where there should be cooperation. I think if this is family or if this is friends, then I think it probably mirrors very closely to how the dynamics were off in a family situation, even if one was overt and one's covert. But if this is a workplace environment, I actually think it's flipped, because this could be a work environment where, and I worked at many places like this, especially when I was young, because I thought it was a good thing. And I think maybe some of you are experiencing this, where this could be a work environment where people say, oh, well, we're like family. And you think, oh, good, because that is a nod to cooperation and relationships. And, caring about like the human experience, but really it's not, because we need to always be dealing in reality, and a workplace is a workplace. So someone who understands that a workplace is a workplace is going to make sure it functions as a workplace, because the boundaries need to be in certain places. Certain people do need to be fulfilling their roles. And when that occurs, it functions properly, and the things that need to get done are getting done. Because if you don't get have you ever been in a situation where it's like everybody's super friendly, but nobody does their job? And so there's just this quiet resentment that just like breeds throughout the environment. Everybody's got to get trained to the same standard. Everybody's got to be functioning, or there will be resentment. I don't care how smiley you are and how many water gun fights you have in the parking lot. And it's if I work 30 minutes extra every single day because you do not pull your weight, I hate you secretly. Or not so secretly, to be honest. Right? But you need someone who says, no, this is a workplace. So the question isn't, I think you've got people here who is like, I have to like grab onto power. And you have other people here who are like, power holds no place. And this should be completely egalitarian. We all should have the same power. Absolutely not. If you think that you've eradicated power in a family dynamic, or if you think that you've eradicated power in a workplace, my friend, you have absolutely not done that. The power has gone underground. It expresses in poisonous ways, and the wrong people have it. Okay, so if this is a workplace, then I think that you've got something off here. You could have a leader that maybe is actually qualified, but is anemic. They maybe feel like, well, it's wrong to exert my power. Especially if this is a young leader, this could be somebody where it's like, nope, that leader needs to be encouraged to really take up their leadership position and understand that if they are a leader and if they make sure everything is functioning, that's where the cooperation and the relationships can actually thrive and function. They need to be doing that, because otherwise there's people in this group that are going to go directly after power, and they're the wrong people that should have it. They haven't worked at that place as long. They don't have the degree. They don't have an understanding of the way this business runs. And if they are given power, or like more power than they should have, then that's what's going to breed resentment, and all the dynamics are going to start getting off again, right? Or you could have a leader that is very tyrannical and just went right for the power, and as long as they get to maintain their own power, they don't care how everything functions, kind of a situation, right? Or you could have, again, different group, like people within this group that are overperforming, certain people who are underperforming, because that's what played out in their family dynamic. They were just expected to overperform, and they don't have a voice. So even though they're overperforming and they hate the other, you know what I'm saying? It's like you have this whole mess. So you could have people here that think a work environment should not have any power, or any hierarchy, or any competition. Because I think this family environment had quite a lot of competition in it, even if it spoke the language of family and cooperation. I think that there was actually a lot of competition for parental attention, for love, for resources. And it shouldn't be there, but it should be a little bit in a work environment to a healthy degree, because you need skillful people to be running the show. And you could potentially have, again, like maybe this is leadership higher up that doesn't understand that. It's like, this should be totally egalitarian. And so nobody knows what voice to listen to, and then it becomes crazy, right? Or for some of you, like there also could be somebody that's like feeling hurt or shocked because they did actually have leadership hold a certain boundary. Because I'm hearing something, this is getting long and I am going to wrap this up, but respect, right? Like respect is a word that maybe people are misunderstanding here as well, because of the dynamics. So yes, there should be power here, but that doesn't mean that there shouldn't still also be respect. But I think like if somebody is getting told no in this work environment, and they just don't like it, and they're overvaluing themselves. It's like, don't you know who I am? And they've worked at this place for like 2 months, and they're like going in there telling everybody what changes should be made. You don't know enough to know that you don't know everything. And you probably are not behind the scenes, and you don't know the inventory, and you don't know all the systems and how it like kind of functions, and so you get told no, and maybe you should have been told no, and you were actually told no in a very direct, matter-of-fact way, and there was respect in that, but somebody here is misreading that as being disrespectful because they didn't get like chosen or something. So I think, and it's again because like the power, the dynamics in their family environment was like off in a way that made them not understand what like respect is. Or there could be a situation where you've got somebody here who is, again, that kind of covert, tyrannical kind of leader that is saying things like, family and cooperation, and they're saying that they're respecting people because they're speaking in like a soft voice or whatever, but they're actually not being very respectful, they are actually being very domineering, and nobody else gets to have a voice or something like that, So it's about putting things in context and people in context, because especially if you're on the outside looking in, it can be very like difficult to tell. And then you could have people here saying that one person is one thing and, you know, all of it. And some people are going to be right about that. And some people are going to be wrong because they can't check their own lens, if that makes sense. So I hope this made sense. The last thing that I'll say is that I think I'm hearing, okay, there's two things. There's two things here. One is like pay attention to how other people make you feel, right? And I think that's, if you have someone who's narcissistic, they feel entitled, they're going to go directly after power. Whenever they don't get power and whenever they're put in their place, they're going to feel bad. And then they're going to say, well, I feel bad and spirituality told me to pay attention to how I feel. And I'm going to lash out and blame other people for why I feel bad. Instead of saying like, I overvalue myself in this environment. I'm actually the tyrant here. And I did get told no, and that I might not agree with everything, but I don't need to agree with everything. You know what I'm saying? But it's, I think that there's something, you see what I'm saying? Like, I think there's something wrong when I get told no. It makes me feel bad. It makes all of us feel bad to get told no, but sometimes it's appropriate. And when you have wisdom and perspective and you can put people in context, you just sort of understand why it happens. And especially when you grow into yourself a little more, you're thankful that it happens sometimes because it makes you not a twat. And you recognize that my dad used to say, I love you too much to let you act that way. There is like a certain value to that, where other people have been in a very abusive dynamic here. And they're always being asked to be the scapegoat or whatever, and they're paying attention to how they make them feel, and that's actually going to lead them out of tyranny, right? So it's two sides of the same coin, right? And so it's not enough really to say pay attention to how you feel, because that's the feeling space. You got to put that in context, right? The other thing is being imperfect is human. Because while being imperfect is human, you're going to have somebody who uses that in an entirely wrong way and uses it as a crutch. Like if this is a workplace environment and you're in a training process and it's like, well, I'm just imperfect. Okay, that's fine. But like you do have to kind of learn how to do your job, because there's also people who are responsible for the production of your team, and they have to make sure you know your ass from a hole in the ground when it comes to doing this task. They have to make sure that you're not doing a task correctly because you don't know how to do it. They have to make sure that you're trained. And it's like learn the rules properly so you can break them properly, kind of thing. There's a certain way you would break the rules that demonstrate that you're trained, kind of thing. So I think there's a certain amount of that where it's like, well, I'm entitled to being imperfect because people are imperfect. That's exactly the wrong attitude. There's an attitude problem there. See how we're peeling back the layers of the onion, but only when you kind of poke can you understand what the actual issue is. That's somebody with an attitude problem. Whereas if there's unrealistic expectations and you've got somebody here who is taught to overperform, and you've got people in the environment that are underperforming and they feel like they're entitled to underperform, then that person might skew towards perfectionism because, they feel like the way for them not to get called out or mistreated is for them just to be entirely perfect. And that's the person that actually does need that, like, hey, being imperfect is totally human. Okay, you're being too hard on yourself. And actually, Joe can take more of the weight on in doing some of this task. You don't, I'm hearing weaponized incompetence, because sometimes when you feel like I have to be the one doing this and only me, because if I let somebody else do it, then it's 10 times the work for me to clean it up. That's somebody who's been used incorrectly. So I think for some of you, the leadership in this dynamic needs to be making sure that that is not what's happening. And they're not tyrannical for doing that. To make sure that if there's a garden, in order for that garden to grow, that is a controlled environment. Okay, it's not just nature growing every which way, because you're going to have everything kind of getting into that. You have to keep the bunnies out. The bunnies are cute, but the bunnies are going to eat your seeds, and you need to keep the bunnies out, and the deers and stuff, right? And you have to keep the weeds out. Somebody's got to be pulling up the weeds. And if you are going to look at that process and say, well, that's incredibly violent, you're going to not have a garden. And there's going to be consequences to that, because you're not going to be able to feed your family through the winter. So you have to have leadership, whether it's in a family or whatever, that can kind of like say those things, right? But then if you've got a family where now there's adult children, they have their own gardens here, the gardens of their personality and stuff. So it's about context, and I feel like I can't explain this any better. And the more I do, I'm probably confusing people. But there's a functionality, there's a dance with power and cooperation. And a lot of times we think that by just eradicating power, then we'll have cooperation. And a lot of times that means there's no boundaries and there's no enforcement. Nobody knows where to look for direction. There's 1,000 voices going on at the same time, and it creates mayhem and chaos. And we can't understand why. It's about everything in its proper place and in proper balance. So I think you need to ask yourself, where does the power go in this dynamic? Who should have it? Somebody with what kinds of traits? Don't think about actual people. Think about what kind of person is perfect for the job. right? Anyways, I'm gonna leave that there. If that resonates, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Bye, guys.